Careers in data science. Hi, I'm Dr. Werner Krebs, Ph.D., CEO of Acculation, ACCELATION.com. And hopefully you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel here or check out one of these other videos on our channel when you're done with this one. And if you like this video, be sure to click that like button. So, what not to do when applying for a job? A couple of approaches don't work. Hi, I'm a really bright guy. Hire me. Hire me. I have a new idea. With the possible exception of strategy consultants, academics, or think tanks, companies generally don't hire people just because they're smart. They hire people because they have an existing business process need. So they're making widgets or they're making software. And they have too many orders for their widgets or their software. And so they look at Bob and they say, okay, well, we've got too many orders coming in, so what we want to do is we want to take Bob over there and clone him. Except, of course, human cloning is illegal. So they take a step back and decide, well, we can't clone Bob, even though he's really good at making widgets, so what else can we do? Well, they look at the job market and they say, can we find someone who's just like Bob so that we can meet our customer demand? And so along those lines, hi, I'm really bright, or hi, I graduated summa cum laude in English. You should hire me because I have this very impressive summa cum laude English degree. Doesn't work, right? So for most people, that very impressive summa cum laude degree in English means that the only thing they're really comfortable with is writing. And writing, unfortunately, by itself does not pay very well because there are a lot of other writers out there. So if you want to be hired just for being bright or for having a very impressive college degree, consider consulting. And they'll usually hire you because you have an MBA or other qualification as a strategy consultant. If you want to be hired because you have a new idea that you think will revolutionize the market, consider doing a startup. Go through an accelerator or incubator. And then you'll be employed by investors backing your new idea. And I mentioned a couple of the other things that do employ people just because they're very bright. So academics, universities, and think tanks. So who am I? Well, I'm Werner G. Krebs. I began programming at a very early age. I was a University of Chicago undergraduate math major, worked for a Nobel laureate in economics, and did a Yale Ph.D. in this then new field of bioinformatics, technically molecular biophysics and biochemistry. So bioinformatics is computer science plus biology, and this led to a career as a computer scientist or a data scientist. Worked for some very famous people, did some time in academia, software company, and then on to finance. I was a senior analyst at Bank of America, or what is now Bank of America, managing their billion-dollar hedging portfolio, and then went on to hedge fund Madison Tyler, now known as Virtue Finance, one of the top high-frequency trading firms in the world, at least according to Wikipedia. I led a team at a firm that did marketing consulting for 90% of Fortune 100 CMOs. I learned marketing modeling from some of the best people in the world in academic marketing. Math and programming made all of this possible. I managed a team of engineers, and have now started my own company, Acculation.com, which does data science and artificial intelligence consulting and software development, among other things. So, graduate of the Founders Institute. Startup Accelerator, not easy. 60% of the people in my program didn't make it through, so it's been compared to Survivor. I have interviewed hundreds of people at different companies, hedge funds and marketing consulting group where I was a hiring manager. I have been told in the past that over 100 people were interviewed for a position that I was eventually selected for. And I'm going to point out again that the important thing to understand is that businesses have business processes. They hire people to fill those business process needs. They prefer people that can start right away. What they generally don't do is hire people simply because they're smart or have a specific college degree without reference to those pre-existing business needs. I'll say a little bit more about this now and then a little bit more at the end. So I'm going to throw some books out at you. Thinking Fast and Slow is a 2011 book by Daniel Kahneman. Its central thesis is that there's a dichotomy between these two modes of thinking, what he calls system one, or the fast, instinctual, and emotional system. This is the process that makes decisions when you're in a hurry, when you're being chased by a lion. It's about making decisions on from the seat of your pants because you're being chased by a lion. And then there's system two, which is the more slower, more deliberate, more logical system. People do not behave as predicted by classical economics. Those of you who are econ majors, were brought up in this rational decision-making framework. The truth is, organizations tend to behave rationally, and there's a lot of evolutionary pressure on organizations, the tribe, the family, corporations, governments to behave rationally. Those organizations that do not behave rationally tend not to survive. Evolution does not work on individuals, at least for animals. It does not work on individuals. It works on the species, or it works on groups. And as a result, the evolutionary pressure to be rational was not applied at the individual level. There's actually a lot of evolutionary pressure for individuals not to be rational. That evolutionary pressure was applied at the group level, on families, on tribes. And there's a lot of evidence that individuals do not behave rationally. So individuals are loss adverse. They're more likely to act to avert a loss than achieve a gain. Thinking slow. So the scientific method is a form of thinking deliberately to find the truth. Is an outcome repeatable, reproducible? Is a hypothesis falsifiable? It is the opposite of science is superstition, astrology, which is one of the few religions that's disprovable. These things appeal to emotion, or that system one, that fast way of thinking. Examples in political science are global warming and its politically motivated deniers. Thinking slow but fast at the same time. So if you have the resources, you have employees and software like an Excel or spreadsheets, you have training, you have MBAs, analysts, you have the inclination, business processes, and an incentive, survival, and profit, try to think slow whenever possible if you're a company. So you're going to try to use computer models, for example, Excel or spreadsheet. That's thinking slow. Businesses frequently try to formalize their most important and most repetitive processes to try to ensure quality. Examples are forms, procedures, assembly lines, quality assurance inspection tests. Ideally, businesses would like their most important frequent analyses to think both slow and fast. So slow in the sense that thinking is deliberative, it's rational, and also fast, not because they're using system one, or thinking intuitively, but it's fast because the thinking is being done by a computer model that can think very quickly. Example are high-frequency trading or marketing analytics. So another book for you, The Signal and Noise, which is a 2012 bestseller by Nate Silver. And the full title is The Signal and the Noise, Why Most Predictions Fail But Some Don't. And it talks about building mathematical models. The synopsis is to build really good mathematical models. You need to understand the field, for example, the baseball statistics in the example he cites, which parameters are important and are reliable to select for using that model rather than relying purely on statistical tests, and using a Bayesian approach to model building. Another example of this is Moneyball, both the book and the movie, and of course Lewis is the author of Moneyball, also did some books on trading and high-frequency trading. I mentioned some people I've worked with. Big data. So another book, Big Data, Revolution That Will Transform How We Live, Work, and Think. It came out in 2013. It talks about big data being a consequence of Kreider's law, which is Moore's law for disk space. We can now store, slice, dice, and analyze complete data sets. For example, all of Amazon purchases. We have enough data to build statistical models and some obscure phenomena, something that was not previously possible. It's only been possible in the last few years. Previously, we needed subsample data to build statistical models. So now we can program a computer to go through all of that data, build its own statistical models, and try to discover correlation and causation. For example, Google discovering certain queries were highly correlated to the spread of swine flu virus. Modeling in political science. So example of this is Robert Pape's 2005 book, Dying to Win, The Strategic Logic of Suicide Terrorism. Robert Pape from the University of Chicago. Most suicidal terrorists, according to his research, are altruistic, well-educated, nationalistically motivated, and they're fully willing and dedicated to their fatal mission as a service to their community. And so this is an example of where you can use big data to discover things and use that to try to learn things about what motivates people and how you can potentially discourage certain behaviors. Another example in political science, something I was a little bit involved with, which is Professor Heckman's work on the Job Training Partnership Act. And this was used to tweak legislated eligibility requirements to try to maximize access to the intended audience, which in this case was the truly unemployed needing skills, and try to minimize free riders. And some of the potential free riders were seasonally unemployed teachers who might appear eligible because of that summer break, and then people who are intentionally quitting their jobs to try to meet the requirements for getting this potentially very valuable training. And by using data, they were able to tweak the legislation so that seasonally unemployed teachers would not be eligible by requiring the person to be unemployed for more than 3 months, and putting in certain other things to try to ensure that the people who were applying really needed the training. People ask me, what should you know to get a career in data? At a minimum, if possible, you should try to learn SQL and things that are SQL-like, as well as NoSQL databases these days. Now, some people ask, like, I only want to learn one programming language. What should it be? The lowest common denominator for analysts these days is Excel, and the programming language that is built into Excel. So if you own a copy of Excel spreadsheet, there's a programming language built in called Visual Basic for Applications. Every analyst at a Wall Street firm, at a minimum, is expected to know that programming language. And if there's just one programming language that you put on your resume, it should be VBA. Moving up from VBA, you've got Java, Python, Ruby, C++, others like C# and Visual Basic.NET. Visual Basic.NET is something very different from VBA, even though they're both Microsoft products. Perl, statistical programming, so R and everything else, SAS, Stata, SPSS, EViews, Gradle. Mathematical programming, numerical Python, Sage, MATLAB, Octave, Mathematica, Maple. In the last few years, we've also seen Scala become important, in part because it's the preferred way of interacting with the Apache Spark toolkit for doing data science in the cloud. Engineering, software and hardware, hacking for speed, reliability, and then software tricks, algorithms, compilers, network latency optimization, cloud, non-cloud, and then hardware tricks, even implementing algorithms in hardware like field programmable arrays. Modeling methods, so you've got regressions and modifications. Classical statistical techniques like linear regression are still very important. These can be partially automated through things like statistical stepwise significance testing, although this can violate statistical assumptions. We've got segmented regressions. We've got manual partition, decision trees. Low data regressions, weighted average of multiple models, nonlinear regression transforms, a log-log, automated shape discovery, where the software tries to figure out what type of transform to apply, for example, the log-log transform, to make linear regression effective. And what is the advantage of linear regression? Well, it's computationally very easy, and this becomes very important when dealing with very large amounts of data. And then there's the new stuff, right? Machine learning. This tends to require a lot more data. It's computationally slower, and it obscures the parameter meaning. We've got hidden Markov models, fuzzy logic, neural networks, genetic algorithms, Bayesian networks, and then manually constructed expert systems, which are low data, high expertise, and tend to be Bayesian or manual decision trees. Clustering techniques, decision tree related. You've also got self-organizing maps and parameter selection through principal component analysis and similar techniques. And of course, In the last few years, we also have deep learning. There's the Pareto rule of efficiency, where 20% of your effort gets you 80% of results. So you can use all of these relatively simple and transparent techniques that I've just described, like classical statistical regression, fuzzy logic, symbolic artificial intelligence, to come up with a first model. Often this is a very fast model that will get you 80% of your accuracy for 20% of your effort. And then you can use deep learning to use a neural network to correct those errors in that model. So that 20% of the time where that simple first step is wrong can be corrected by the neural network. And this is a very powerful technique. It's based on the way the human brain works. It's been proven very effective. Getting a job on Wall Street. So I already mentioned SQL and Excel VBA. So typically going to be minimum requirements for analyst. If you can only put 2 skills on your resume, put down SQL and Excel VBA, and only 1 programming skill, I would say Excel VBA. Know those well, because you will be asked questions about them. Some mathematics and finance background, a math, econ, stat degree, CFA candidate, MBA, quantitative Ph.D. are all very helpful, as are hard programming skills like Java, C++, Python, Scala, etc. Those are all useful. Don't lie on your resume. Don't put programming languages that you've never used. Don't claim you can program when you can't. You can learn programming from books, online videos, and websites. What's employable? MBAs, JDs, and MDs, and some extent PhDs in most quantitative fields tend to get taken a lot more seriously than people who just have bachelors. People who just have bachelors are taken a lot more seriously than people who just have high school. And people who have actually graduated from high school are taken a lot more seriously than people that have gotten a JED. Joint degrees like JD MBAs, PhD JD, PhD MBA, PhD MD, MD MBA tend to get taken a lot more seriously. MD or JD, it's a licensed profession. The degree you get tends to be a lot less important than having the license. The degree is a requirement for the license. This is in contrast to the MBA. So salaries for MBAs tend to be highly variable. A Stanford MBA might make as much as $120,000 a year on average at graduation, whereas someone from a lower tier school might only make on average $40,000 as of a few years ago. Most of the top earning MBAs a few years back went to Wall Street. Today it might be more consulting. The low-paying MBAs tend to be found in nonprofits. Historically, military veterans with an honorable discharge and demonstrated technical skills were taken more seriously than high school graduates, and in some cases, more seriously than bottom-tier college graduates. Military officers often became CEOs, especially after business school. This may be changing. Starbucks pointed out that military veterans have twice the unemployment rate of general population. And this might be because of the psychological trauma of warfare, and that's something that is present today that wasn't seen in military veterans 2 decades ago. Quantitative and programming skills are always in demand, get taken very seriously. Working at famous companies, institutions, or people, especially in positions that are highly selective and hard to obtain. So you can follow Warren Buffett's advice of ignoring the salary and working where you will learn the most. So working for some famous person in some field, even if that doesn't pay as much as working for someone who's not famous or not as educational and experienced but pays more. What if you can't program and can't do quantitative? Well, an MBA is a good idea. It doesn't require as much quantitative. Sales and marketing skills can also be very employable. These are people skills similar to being an actor and actress. Some people call them expressives. This can be very high risk. Although some salespeople make 6-figure salaries, unlike programmers, there are a lot of salespeople making very low salaries of $20,000 or less. And salespeople are in one of the few occupations that are potentially exempt from minimum wage. So you have some salespeople that are purely on commission, making a salary of $0. And this is not uncommon in commercial real estate, for example, where a person might be very happy to do one big deal a year, And when they make that deal, they'll get a $40,000 commission, but they'll spend most of the year trying to make that deal on a salary of zero. And there's very high stress, as you can imagine. Related to sales and often requiring an MBA is business development. So this is a salesperson who tries to negotiate deals between startups and potential partners. This is a good person for an engineer to partner with if you want to do a startup. So again, what not to do when applying for a job. Hi there, I'm a really bright guy. Hire me because I'm really smart. Or hire me, I have a new idea. Or hire me, I graduated summa cum laude in English. Why? And we've already gone over why these approaches aren't that good, right? Companies look for people that are similar to people they have already hired in general. So they look for Bob the widget maker, and they want someone who's similar to Bob the widget maker. So let me throw another book out there for you. It's called The Black Swan, and this is the nonfiction bestseller by Taleb, not the fictional movie with Natalie Portman. So in The Black Swan, Taleb talks about why professions have different risk levels. The extreme value distribution is counterintuitive to the human psyche. Many media professions, like acting, writing, generally don't make good money. They have an extreme value distribution in their salary, which is counterintuitive. A tiny fraction of the very best dominate the media, and they tend to make huge salaries while the rest starve. So if you think you're a good actor, you might make a good salesperson. They have similar personalities, and actors hawk a lot of merchandise. Salespeople, however, tend to have less variability in their salaries than actors. Non-media professionals, like lawyers and doctors, tend to have even more even salaries. Unlike an actor, who typically makes very little, doctors, lawyers, and programmers tend to do very well, although the best doctors don't make that much more than an average doctor. And the best doctors make a lot less than the very best actors, even though the average actor makes a lot less than the average doctor. So for every one J.K. Rowling billionaire author, there are hundreds or thousands or maybe even millions of starving writers out there. If you want to make it as an actor or writer, it helps to get into the best acting and writing programs, because these give you credibility and a name recognition with the top of the field and visibility with people that can actually hire you into the most lucrative positions. Startup accelerators. If you're adventurous and want to get funding for your own company, you can apply to accelerators. The term accelerator and incubators technically mean different things, but in practice they're used interchangeably. The most famous are Y Combinator, Techstars, and Founders Institute, but there are many others out there. Several that are just out here locally are Amplify, Launchpad, and Science. It helps to have a high IQ or have attended an Ivy League university. It's almost a requirement in some of these startups and incubators. Knowing programming or marketing and sales management is very helpful. This is very high risk, right? 90% of startups fail, according to some statistics. And in contrast, Y Combinator, historically, this may be changing, but historically, Y Combinator only accepted less than 1% of the applicants. But about 90% of those typically went on to achieve multi-million-dollar valuations. So getting into Y Combinator hugely changes the risk profile, right? You go from something where the odds are you're going to fail to something where the odds are that you're very likely going to succeed. And that's why these are potentially useful. Internet of Things. Well, a few years back, a $35 computer came out. The Raspberry Pi, it ran Linux, it connected to HDMI, TV, Ethernet, USB for a keyboard, even had Wi-Fi. So these used a mini SD card for its hard disk and an old smartphone charger for its power supply. What's the take-home message? Well, if a computer costs only $35, they're going to be in everything and everywhere. My bio again, programming at an early age, Yale Ph.D. in bioinformatics or data science related field, and then sometime in academia, a software company, and then on to finance. Was a senior analyst at a major bank, worked at a major hedge fund. Worked for a leading marketing analytics firm that later went on to become NYSE listed, and have now started my own company, which does data science, artificial intelligence consulting, among other things. Thank you so much for your time. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you found this video enjoyable, we'll hope you consider liking us and check out some of our other videos. And of course, visit us at our website at acculation.com. That's ACCELERATION.com, and links should be appearing in this video as well to that website. Thank you and have a great day.